Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mary Kay Andrews, and welcome to the Friends in Fiction Show.
I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
And this is Friends in Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians. If you're not a member already, we hope you will join our Facebook group, which is more than 250,000 members strong. We'd also love to invite you to follow us on Instagram and YouTube, and to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, which is full of awesome bonus content. You can find out more about our community and all we have to offer at friendsandfiction.com.
And I'm here to remind you about the Friends in Fiction 2025 book subscription box, available only through our friends at Oxford Exchange, which, side note, our friend Christina Clancy, who we're about to welcome, is going to be there. So y'all need to go see her. So for an all-in-one price, you'll get 3 separate shipments in 2025. In March, you'll get Patti's new book. In May, you will get mine, Beach House Rules. And in June, you will get Kristin's. All of them are signed. All of them are hardcover first editions. Plus, you'll get exclusive gifts, a Friends in Fiction friendship bracelet, and a car magnet that are available only with this bundle. So visit Oxford Exchange now to get yours. There's a link on our website at friendsandfiction.com, or you can also go to Oxford Exchange and type Friends and Fiction in the search bar.
Yeah, on this episode, we are thrilled to welcome Christina Clancy to discuss her new novel, The Snowbirds, which just came out February 4th, and we are so excited to speak to Christina about it. Now, let me tell you about Christina. She is the author of The Second Home and Shoulder Season. She was born in Denver and raised in Milwaukee. She graduated from the University of Minnesota and worked at IBM before returning to school to earn a PhD in creative writing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. After graduating, she taught English at Beloit College for a decade before turning to writing full-time.
Her novels have been featured on Good Morning America, CNN, Travel and Leisure, BuzzFeed, Pop Sugar, and Shelf Awareness. Her short stories and essays have appeared in the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, the Sun magazine, and in various literary in various literary journals. Do you want me to keep going? She lives in
I'm not going to say the name of the journal.
Because 2 of them I can't pronounce, so I'm not going to say that.
Pleiades, right? Is it Pleiades?
Well,
anyway,
read the last one for me.
Yeah, they're very fancy, prestigious literary journals. Christina lives in Madison with her very tall husband in their 1916 prairie-style house, and she snowbirds in Palm Springs as much as she can. She has 2 grown children who live in Chicago and New York City, and she has a little white dog named Bunny who loves everyone.
Her new novel, The Snowbirds, was just released on February 4th, and it is the page-turning story of a couple who flee winter in the Midwest for Palm Springs, where they find their relationship at a crossroads.
Now, here's a fun fact. Meg and I actually met Christina and had dinner with her in another pretty well-known Palm Springs writer-resident, Stephen Rowley, who wrote The Guncle last year when I was on book tour. So, Sean, can you bring Christina on so we can get reacquainted?
Hello.
Hi, Christina.
Hi. Thank you so much. Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're so glad you could be with us. We're going to get right to it. Christina, welcome to Friends in Fiction. We ask this question a lot, but after reading The Snowbirds, adorable jacket, I, for one, can't wait to have you tell us what this novel is about, and then what is it really about?
I love that question. So the novel is ostensibly about a Midwestern couple. They live in Madison, Wisconsin. The broad contours of their life are similar to my own because they're about my age, 25.
Yeah.
Actually, they're in their 50s, and they have reached a crossroad in their relationship. They've been together 30 years, but they've never actually gotten married, even though they have two grown kids and they've spent a lot of time apart. So when Grant loses his job, he wants to get married, and Kim is just done with winter, and she asks him if he will spend the winter in Palm Springs at her ex-husband Basil's condo in this funny little condo complex. So they hit the road and spend time in Palm Springs. Grant gets involved in hiking, and then they get into an argument one day, and Grant doesn't come home from a hike the next day. And she's not sure if this is one of Grant's many emotional walkabouts that he takes when he's upset, or if he's actually truly lost. And in the meantime, a huge huge search is underway for Grant, and Kim isn't sure if it's all for naught. So that's what it's ostensibly about. But a lot of it's about, I don't know. I mean, I guess some of it's about what happens in a relationship when you've been together for a long time and you don't stay married for the same reasons that you get married. So I wanted to write about a couple that's kind of at this pivotal juncture in their relationship where they're just trying to figure out what the future is going to look like. You know, what's it going to be like to take care of each other as they get old? And can they trust each other to be reliable and steady? And so that's something that I think a lot of people in midlife go through. And it's also about weather. You know, a lot of couples don't agree on where to live. And when you're raising kids and your life is really busy, where you live is dictated a lot by where schools are and where your jobs are. But as your life becomes a little more free and you can make a decision about whether to stay where you are or go live somewhere else, that weather becomes a pretty important question. And it's right now really, really cold. And it's been cold for a long time in Wisconsin. And I've been thinking about it a lot myself.
It's so funny. And it was hilarious, like the timing when I opened this book, because my son is our son is in 7th grade. And so, hopefully he'll be him for 5 more years, but he could go off to school potentially. But I looked at my husband, we were at lunch the other day, and Beaufort is not cold, but for some reason it's been so cold this winter so far. And we had like 6 inches of snow. And I looked at him and I was like, when we are empty nesters, we have got to move somewhere warmer for the winter. And he was like, oh, totally. And we were laughing because we were like, we live in North Carolina. Like, it's not that cold. But for us, we were like, oh, we need sunshine. Like, this is miserable. So it was really funny to like open that book at that time. Fortunately, we were in agreement. He wasn't like, oh, I want to go to the Alps for the winter, but like, let's go be somewhere warm. But I love that part. So it's true. That is an important thing. But this book does a deep dive into the nature of long-term relationships, as you said. So Kim and Grant have a 30-year long commitment with 2 grown children. And at the start of the book, the reader can definitely see, as you mentioned, that they're facing a full-blown midlife crisis, which is always fun to read about. And yet you've managed not to fall into these kind of risky cliches that you can fall into when you're writing about midlife. So can you talk about that and sort of how you were able to kind of talk about this really important thing, but without, diving into the tropes that sometimes we see?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the rules I had for myself when I was working on this book is that I really wanted my character Kim to be really normal. I didn't want her to have huge quirks and be really, difficult for their reader to identify with. I wanted any reader to be able to think, oh, I could be Kim. I could be somebody who's in a situation like that. So I think also when you think about middle age, I just wanted her to be like a normal middle-aged person who's dealing with a changing body and changing life in a way that seems kind of measured and thoughtful without being too dictated by some extreme aspect of her personality. Yeah. So I think that helped a little bit. And I mean, honestly, I think it just helps to be middle-aged myself and to be thinking about all of these things. So it keeps me from maybe falling down, the tropes that a lot of writers use, because I'm just writing about the stuff that I'm also thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I appreciated that you didn't have Grant buying a Ferrari.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I actually also thought that because they go to Palm Springs for the winter, I thought it might be, the reader might actually expect that Grant was going to end up being gay at the end of it, because Palm Springs is a very gay place. A lot of the
The
people
gayest.
yeah,
Except for
between them
Key West. Key West might be a little gayer.
and Provincetown, but I thought that might be something that readers might expect. So I shouldn't say what actually happens, but I didn't want that to be something that, you never want your reader to feel like they're too far ahead of you when you're telling a story.
That's so true.
Now, you've set this book, The Snowbirds, in two wildly different places, the liberal college town of Madison, Wisconsin, and the sun-drenched desert of Palm Springs. These places, you really make them come alive, so much so that the settings seem like characters in the book. Now, we know you and your husband snowbird in Palm Springs. Had you been thinking about for a while partially setting a book there?
Yeah, well, so I'd been going to Palm Springs occasionally, first with a bunch of girlfriends, and that's when I first discovered it and just connected with it. I love the desert, and because I'm from Denver, I think there's something about the quality of the air that makes me feel really comfortable. Even some of the architecture reminded me of growing up as a kid. And then during COVID, we rented a house for a long time, and the longer I was there, the more I learned about Palm Springs, and I would learn little things. At first it seems so perfect and ideal. The weather is usually 100% perfect with a bright blue sky and sun. And as you're there, you start realizing this is a place where people live and where they have problems just like everywhere else. And so I would learn things like that the rats live in the palm trees. And I had no idea about that. And then you'd find out about the homeless population and some of the issues that they're dealing with there. And the other thing I learned about is I'm a big hiker, and I learned that it's really pretty dangerous when you go hiking in Palm Springs, even though it seems like it would be the safest place in the world because the city's right there. But when you go into the mountains, there are all kinds of things that can befall you as you're out there. So I just wanted to write about some of the discoveries that I was making that made Palm Springs seem so much more dimensional and interesting to me. And it's hard to write about Palm Springs as somebody who hasn't grown up there and spent her whole life, because it has this incredible history. It's home to all the stars, and you can just go down a rabbit hole of like Howard Hawks, the film director who lived there. I just make a glancing reference to him in the book, but I did a whole 2-week deep dive on his life in Palm Springs. So it was just fun to learn about it, and then also to write about it from the perspective not of someone who's been there forever, but of people who are experiencing it themselves for the first time.
Yeah, we had dinner at a restaurant that was frequented by, remind me, was it Frank Sinatra?
It was Frank Sinatra's favorite, Melvin's, with the chicken pot pies.
Yeah, that was a fun night. And by the way, the one night it wasn't perfect weather was when we were there and it rained.
I remember it was really cold when you were there.
No, it poured rain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which I did not sign up for.
I was thinking about all those poor people who went to Florida last week to be warm and got snow. I'm sure they were great, fun vacation. No, I think it's so relatable what you said though about, when you're doing research about a place in particular, it's so hard because you have this just breadth of research and everything you're finding out is so interesting. And it's that moment of okay, what do I put in? What's actually moving the story forward? And what is something that I just think is a fun anecdote?
Mm-hmm.
So but you did a really good job balancing that. But we really love the evolution of Grant as a, not super likable guy at the beginning of his hike to a flawed but believable partner. So where did Grant come from? Was he inspired by anyone or just a figment of your imagination?
Well, Grant was hard for me because my own husband is really easy to be married to. He's honestly the most affable, nice, interesting guy. He's great. And sometimes when I was working on the book, I just had to make someone so different than John in order to be able to write him, So Grant, the more I wrote him, the more I had him start talking back to me. And it just made sense to have him be a philosophy professor, because that's such a male part of a college usually. A lot of my colleagues when I was a professor in the philosophy department were men. He's not based on any of the guys I worked with, but I just kind of wanted someone who was really stuck in academia, who loved his job, who lived for the students and the kind of conversations that you have at work, dealing with like life. Like suddenly he's like everybody else, and he's not in this ivory tower, and he's not reading books about Kierkegaard. He's thinking about his wife or his partner all of a sudden. So Grant, just the more I wrote him, the more real he became. And I really like flawed characters. I know sometimes readers like to, they'll complain if a character's flawed, but to me, the more flawed the character, the more interesting they are. I mean, we're all flawed. I mean, except you guys.
Yeah, except for
except
for us on the screen. I mean, we are.
Right.
Yeah.
We see there's poor other people who are, and that must be hard for them.
Yeah, we try to be understanding. When I think about Grant, I think about the word petulant, which you don't get to use in everyday conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I
That's a really
don't
good word for
anyway.
Grant. Yeah, he's kind of indulgent of his own emotions and can be a little bit he disregards where Kim is coming from some of the time.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I think a lot of men can be like that.
Yeah.
Really?
Anecdotally, I sometimes hear that,
I've heard that, but I wouldn't know it firsthand. Now, Kim and Grant, speaking of exes, both I don't have any exes, but Kim and Grant have exes who are both still present in their lives in pretty unusual roles. And I think readers are going to be fascinated with one of the lines from Snowbirds. I think you really kind of boiled it down with this one. We outsourced our emotional needs to our exes, never fully showing the messiest parts of ourselves to each other. So we'd love to hear from you about Basil, who is Kim's ex, and Sasha, who is Grant's.
Yeah, so Basil's really fun. I'm always interested in characters who are people just in life who seem to lead a bigger life than I do.
Yeah.
You wonder, how do they have the energy for all the things that they do and all the travel and so Basil is a lyricist for musicals, and he travels all over the world, and Kim observes that she doesn't, she's never laid flat on an airplane or done a lot of the things or played tennis with Bono the way Basil has. But she's kind of they meet somewhere, they're really good for each other. I think that Kim is a very grounding person for Basil, and Basil can go off and do all the things he needs to do in the world and know that Kim is going to be there for him. So, and he makes her life seem more interesting. So I liked having that kind of counterbalance to Kim's personality, where she has that outlet for this more wild, fun side of her. And then for Grant, he was married to a woman named Sasha, who, when you said that Grant's kind of petulant, she puts up with them. It's not really her problem. She can be his friend, and they're not just friends, but they work together, and she never changed her last name. So at the college, everybody thought they were married still. So, I think that maybe Kim, I hadn't thought about this until we're talking about it now, but when they said they outsourced their emotional needs, maybe it made Kim stay farther away from Grant. She didn't want to engage with him as much because she always had Sasha there. And maybe she saw Sasha also as some competition for some part of Grant that he can't reveal to her that scares her.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting when you write about a character, because Kim and Basil meet in college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
They actually meet sooner than that.
No, yeah, everybody but Kim seems to know that Basil's gay.
Yeah, she met when they were at camp.
Oh,
Went to
camp,
summer
right.
together. Yeah, her dad had run a camp, and so she
That's right.
spent her summers there. And Basil's parents didn't want him to be gay, and so they did everything they could to try to make that relationship work because they were so excited that he was with a woman. And so there's some tension later on with the mother, where she acknowledges that she knew when Kim was marrying her son that he was gay, and she feels guilty about the fact that she never stopped that.
I loved the summer camp part. I wrote a camp book, and I was a big camp person. So that was
I was a camp counselor.
Yeah, it was good. Okay, we have to talk about this zany cast of eccentrics who populate the novel, because it's a lot of fun. So we've got a widow, a gigolo, a gay couple, an elderly couple, a bitter ex, a new age healer. Like, I could go on. So how much fun did you have kind of creating this cast of characters? And is this cast that you created indicative of the Palm Springs locals? Palm Springs locals.
Well, we were talking earlier about how different places, can bring out some different part of your personality. And I think that part of the reason Kim and Grant can feel so liberated in a place like Palm Springs is because the people there tend to be different than the people that you'd meet here. Like, for example, in Palm Springs, we turn our condo into an Airbnb most of the year. And the guy who cleans it for us used to be Elizabeth Taylor's personal assistant. And that's just kind of normal. And then a friend of mine said she was just renting to someone who does hair for the awards shows. And the person who does that. So you just encounter different kinds of people than you do in your daily life when you're living in Madison, Wisconsin. People here are super interesting in their own right, but it's a different kind of glamour, So the other thing is we have a condo complex that we live in. And I got to know all these eccentric characters there because people are there for different reasons. Some of them have been there forever, since the 70s. Or maybe their parents bought a condo back then. And so they're like the ancestrals. They never want anything to change. They like it just the way it is. They complain about everything, like whether the pool temperature is too high or what they're spending on trimming the lemon bushes. And then you have people who are younger and newer, and maybe they have beautiful houses and or condos, and they want their places to be really top notch and spend every last dollar on it. So they're sometimes in conflict. And then you have the Canadians who come down and complain about the prices going up of all the rentals and the dollar being so weak, right, or so strong compared to the Canadian dollar. So you just have all these people who are there for the same reason. They want to have fun and enjoy the sun, yet they have a different way of spending their time. And one other thing is that most of the people that we meet have a lot of time. Where when I'm at home, people aren't retired, and so many people in Palm Springs are. And so people pay attention to things that a lot of people, when you're working, you just don't notice. So it's really fun to write about that.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. You're right. You do, when you're not as busy, you're focusing on different things that when you're working, you're like, ugh, whatever. I don't have time to deal with that.
Yeah. The neighbor's dog is barking, but it's not that big a deal. But there, it's like World War III.
Yeah.
We had a big conflict at our condo complex about the color of the umbrellas at the pool. People somebody wanted to buy new umbrellas, so they all matched, and they were turquoise, and it was just a really big, long, drawn out battle.
Well, that is unforgivable.
I thought about that, though. I mean, because where I live is a lot of retirees too, and that's actually really interesting. Like, a lot of our town problems are very humorous. It's a very small town, but there are a lot of retirees, and I bet you're right. Like, a lot of the things that I'm like, really, but you're right. You have more time to think about it because you're gonna have to actually view things through that lens now. I really had never thought of that, which is wild that I hadn't.
Well, it's kind of nice to have people keep an eye on things. It's nice to feel like you're really part of a community because the people who are there are there. They're really paying attention, and they care about everybody. And, I find that when I go back to Palm Springs, even though our condo complex is really quirky, I just love everybody. They're just kind of like a family that you have because you spend more time with them.
Yeah. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you, Christina, to show these amazing sweaters. Your mom, now she designed them, right?
No, so there's a site that knitters use called Ravelry, and you can look for patterns. And so my mom, with all of my books, as soon as I'd show her the cover, she would go and find yarn that would match the colors and a pattern that would work with the yarn. And so it's just the most cool way to collaborate with your mom. And I have a wonderful cover designer. She's done all 3 of my books, Olga Gerlich, and she's part of it. So as soon as they get the covers ready, Olga will say, "We have to make sure this is okay with your mom." Get Pat's approval. So for
Olga is amazing because you have the best covers.
Yeah,
you really do.
Yeah, this one is really. I have the hardcover that I just got, and she even put this like green and white on the side.
Oh.
Isn't that pretty?
Yeah, it is. The banding.
Yeah.
Very pretty. Yeah. Now it's in the art, but
I'm sorry?
You have shoulder season nearby you?
Yeah, right
So
here.
right behind you. Okay, I can see. I loved that cover too. So
You know what's cool about shoulder season is it has kind of a gritty texture.
Mhm.
And I asked Olga why she made the texture gritty, and it's shoulder season takes place mostly in 1981 at an old Playboy resort in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And she said, oh, I made it gritty so it would feel like an old matchbook cover. I mean, isn't
So,
that amazing? The
Yeah,
things
the
that
attention to
she thinks
detail is
about.
amazing. All right,
so
now, so
Yeah.
hold up the sweater.
Okay, so we had to have two because my mom thought, well, if you're in Palm Springs doing events and you need to wear something, you need a vest. So this is the vest.
so
So
cute.
pretty.
Isn't that gorgeous? And I can show
Yeah.
that
The
detail. there. Isn't
detail
that
is
amazing?
amazing.
Oh.
And then I needed something warm. And I'll just show you really quickly the inspiration. So the chair with the stripes. And then also there's a pool that's blue. So she knit this one to wear when I'm in a cold climate.
I love it.
No.
So cute.
Yeah, it was so much fun. It was every time I'd see her, she'd measure me and show me little bits of it. And then she was so excited to show it. We call her Tricky Pat because she used to work at a yarn store. And whenever people had problems with their knitting, they'd come in and they'd say, send her to Tricky. So she became Tricky Pat.
So cute.
Yeah.
I love that.
All right, back on track now. Christina, your novels all seem to explore the theme of restless people trying to figure out how and where they can feel at home in this world. Why do you think you're drawn to this topic, and why does it appeal to so much to us as readers?
You know, it's interesting. When I finished my second book, Shoulder Season, my daughter read it and she said, Mom, you wrote 2 books about coming home, which I thought was interesting because the second home is about coming home, ostensibly like it's part of the book jacket copy. But I didn't think when I was working on that book that it was so much about coming home. And then the Snowbirds is obviously, middle-aged couple trying to figure out where's home. Can you leave home? Can you be home somewhere else? And I guess when I was a little kid, we lived in Denver and my parents got divorced and my mom moved us really suddenly. Like all of a sudden we were just on an airplane flying from Denver to Minnesota and without, back in the 70s, like people didn't give kids a lot of explanations for what was happening. And we never really moved back. And I never really thought about it until I became a writer, but I think you write your anxieties and you write about things that you think about a lot. And I think that early, that dislocation that I felt was something that I just artistically want to, go back to and think about how you feel home. And I'm also a Cancer. So I think I had that homing
Me
in.
too.
Oh, what's your birthday?
Yeah, July 16th.
Oh, July 10th.
No
And I'm
way.
July 27th. I'm a Leo. though.
Oh, Leo. Yeah.
Yeah, Leo. I was gonna say, although I think both of us, I think Mary Kay and I both also write a lot about home. Like I definitely would say that's like a theme for me. I don't know. Because I was always the kid that, when everyone was like, I can't wait to grow up and leave this little town. And I'd be like, well, I'm gonna grow up and move right back here. And then of course, like I didn't, and a lot of them did. You know how that Oh, that's interesting though.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about where you just feel the most comfortable and where you're at home. And I think, getting back to the idea of midlife, you can leave your house. Like the other day, I was on a walk in my neighborhood and somebody walked up to me and said, oh, Kristy, you still live here? Because so many people leave when their kids are grown. Yeah. And we do have a house that we probably have more room than we need. So you think about it a lot. Like, well, it feels like home now, but should it not? Should we go somewhere else? And it's very destabilizing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But fun and exhilarating too, to think you can move and go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting. Okay, well, I have to ask you just because I think this is really fascinating. So you started out your career at IBM and then went back to school to, become an English professor and then a writer. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of your journey and how you started and what made you think, okay, I think it's time. I think I'm going to be a writer.
Well, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And even in college, I was an English major and I wrote for the school newspaper, but I graduated during the economic recession. So I would always try to keep one foot in the writing field. So even when I was at IBM, I did a lot of marketing and writing, like copy editing and writing there. And then when my husband was super busy, with his job. He represents Native tribes, and he was on this huge case where he was trying to prevent like the second largest copper and zinc mine from being built. So it was really important, but he worked all the time. And that's when I kind of started dabbling back into writing, and I joined a writing group, and I just always really wanted to do it. I would go to the library when I was a kid. I was one of those kids who hung out in the library all the time and knew all the librarians. And I just always had this feeling there was a book there that I wanted, but it hadn't been written yet. So I just wanted to be the person to write that. So I never lost that feeling. And even when I started taking writing classes again, then I decided to go back to school and get. I mean, I never would have thought I'd go all the way to getting a PhD, but I wanted to be able to teach. I really like being around students, so that was the way to do it at the time.
Interesting. All right. Well, I love that. That's really cool. Well, we always, have a lot of writers and aspiring writers out there watching, and everybody's path looks a little different, and I love that about.
It's hard. It's a career that so many people want to be in, but it's really hard to actually make any money doing it and to feel like you can have an actual career. So I feel very fortunate that I even was able to get a job teaching. And I learned so much. It kept my brain in books for 10 years. It's so fun to talk about books and stories and essays with students and to be part of their writing and learning and getting excited about writers.
Yeah. Okay, Christina, if you'll stick around, we have more to talk to you about. But first, we have a few quick reminders for our listeners and viewers out there.
Yes. For all of you watching and listening, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies of The Snowbirds. The perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll not only be getting it at a discount, but all your purchases there support our show, our guests, and indie bookstores nationwide. And don't forget to visit friendsandfiction.com for details on our show schedule, upcoming in-person events, and links to the award-winning Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, our merch store, and our Substack newsletter sign up.
Yeah, speaking of our Substack, you can read all our free weekly posts on the Substack website or app, or subscribe for free to get them directly in your inbox. But if you upgrade to our paid Substack, which costs just $5 a month, you'll have access to deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests, plus monthly roundtable discussions, like the amazing one we just did on writing tips, our own and those from our guests that we've had on the show. And the four of us also host occasional private VIP Zooms exclusively for our paid subscribers. If you enjoy tuning in for our weekly author interviews, this is a great way you can support us for basically the cost of a single cup of coffee, which is going to go up, by the way, each month. So check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com.
So, Christina, can you tell us where everyone watching and listening out there can find you online and on tour in the coming weeks?
Oh, sure. Well, I have a website, ChristinaClancyWrites.com, and I think you can also find it on Kristy Clancy, but Kristy, as you know, everybody spells Kristy differently.
Yes, it's very hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's Christina Clancy Writes, and then on Instagram, I'm Christina Clancy Author, and you can find me there. And then I have a big tour coming up, which is so exciting for me because both of my first books came out during COVID. So I've never actually had a tour, and this is my third book. So I don't even know what it's going to be like. I just hope people come to my events. But so I start out on the 2nd of February in Tampa at the Oxford Exchange. Then I'm in Milwaukee on the 4th of February at Boswell Book Company. And the 5th of February, I'm at the Madison Public Library for the Wisconsin Book Festival. Then I'm in Palm Springs for the big Readers Fest that they have.
Who are you?
In Palm Springs, where Mary Kay was. And Stephen will be there, and Byron. And then I'm in St. Louis for their library event on the 10th. And I've got 3 events in Chicago, in Winnetka, Evanston, and Naperville. Kalamazoo, I'm out on the 15th. And then and then Warwick's on the 18th, and in San Diego, that's a beautiful bookstore, and they've been super supportive. And then I'll be at Diesel Books in Los Angeles and Page's Bookstore also in Manhattan Beach. And then I have a bunch of other events in March.
Well, I'm impressed that you could rattle all those off.
I've been making all my travel plans. Kind of fresh.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you, Christina, so much for talking about the Snowbirds today. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. And thanks for being on with us on Friends in Fiction.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. I really love your show.
We
So
love
be
having you.
Be sure to tune in next week when Patti, Kristin, Mary Kay, and I will all be together live to welcome our Friends in Fiction Author of the Month, Pam Janoff, to discuss her new novel, Last Twilight in Paris. That show will air live on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, February 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it will be published to our podcast for your listening pleasure on Friday, February 21st.
Hey, everybody. Thanks to all of you for being with us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.